Hi, good evening, everyone. What a pleasure it is to connect with all of you through Autism Connect. And my name is Kamini Lakhani. Um, I love to call myself Mohit's mother. Mohit is my 33-year-old on the spectrum. Um, very proud of him, very proud of the person he's turned out to be. I'm also the founder of Support for Autistic Individuals, Sai Connections, and now Empowered Autistic Individuals. My aim is to empower parents and to provide quality services in the field of autism. And I've been doing this for almost 3 decades now, working with my son and then supporting other families as well. So it's a real pleasure to be here and present to all of you. Today, we're going to talk about the 5 core deficits of autism. This is a very different way of looking at ASD. So I want you to think about your child for a bit, and you might feel that your child or your teenager or your adult appears to be disengaged, and then there are speech and language delays. We find many of our children having social anxiety, fine and gross motor issues, behavior challenges, hitting, meltdowns, laughing uncontrollably, screaming. And then, of course, we have developmental delays. We may find that our children are not motivated. They don't engage in activities, or they sit for a while and then they run away from activities. So how does all of this fit into the core deficits and the co-occurring conditions, right? What is the core that we're trying to address with our children? So this presentation is basically focused on us understanding what are the core areas that are actually impacted. So here you have it. There are core deficits of autism, and then there are co-occurring conditions. When I say core, this means the root cause, what is actually going on. Also, the core deficits are pervasive. That means we find this in children, adults across the spectrum. Prior to DSM-5, we had Asperger's syndrome as being separate from autism spectrum disorders. But now it's all clubbed together. And what you'll find is when I describe the core deficits, we see that this is across the board with people on the spectrum. And so when I think of core deficits, how do they manifest? What do they look like? Not understanding their roles in situations. So our children, our teenagers may not understand without being told exactly what their role is in a situation. Not being able to shift attention in changing situations. So you might find yourself telling your child, okay, now focus on this or look at this. Either they focus too much on something and are unable to move on and focus on something else. That's a core area that needs attention. They may not have sustained motivation. So many moms tell me that my child can pay attention for a short period of time, and then then he loses attention. How should I increase this sustained motivation, sustained attention? You might find that your child avoids activities or runs away from activities, does a little bit, and then moves away, right? Sometimes they look at something and they may find that, just don't want to engage. I just want to leave. So I'm thinking of one of my students who's now a 25-year-old young man. And when they started working with me on the RDI program, we were doing a simple activity. His mom was, he was handing clothes to his mom. His mom was drying it on a clothesline. That was the roles that they had set up in that interaction. And we live in Mumbai. So, in Mumbai, the landings are such that you're on a landing, there's staircases going up, there's a staircase going down. And this boy who was 12 at that time, in a matter of 6 minutes, he left the framework about 20 times. So his mother had to bring him back. So this avoidance, this running away, right, is pretty common. Then not being able to inhibit actions, not being able to control oneself, not being able to stop oneself. So many moms say that he just doesn't know when to stop eating, right? Um, this also reflects in obsessive thoughts, obsessive actions. Um, they find it difficult to accept support. So because of that lack of back and forth connection, it's a little difficult for them to accept that support. And sometimes they may appear to be socially disengaged. So I believe people on the spectrum are hugely intelligent. They have brilliant minds. They have beautiful minds. And sometimes it may look like, they're socially disengaged. Yeah. Also, not understanding how they impact others, right? This is something that is also very common. And I remember, when Mo was much younger, and I used to travel very often to the US to get services for him. And those were the days where I was trained. I was trained as a behavior analyst. So I would go to the Lova's clinic in California. They would teach me how to work with Mohit. And so it used to be a day of working with him, learning, then coming home, going back to the hotel. Uh, he was on a gluten casein-free diet, so then cooking for him, and it used to be very exhausting. So one day, I just, I was finding it difficult to take all of that. It was an overload for me, and I broke down, and I looked at my beautiful boy, and I just realized that does he realize what's going on with me? These are those moments where you feel that disconnection, not understanding the impact of what they do to others, right? So I know of many adults who can get into those rage attacks, and then they don't know what is the impact they have of that on somebody else, right? So understanding how they impact others. Now, these are all the core deficits. This is how the core deficits can manifest, irrespective of the level of functioning. We tend to look at high functioning, low functioning. I don't enjoy using those words, but just for the sake of putting a point across, my teacher, Dr. Steve Gutstein, who's the founder of RDI Connect, shares this beautiful example. And he talks about this young man that he was working with who did very well on the RDI program. And he got into college, and he went and he was staying in a dorm. Now, Dr. Gutstein had supported him over the years, and he told this person that, if you're ever stuck for something, don't worry, just call me and I'll help you out. And one night, I think late night, very late, he gets a call from this person, and he answered. And this person asked him, I have all these boxes in front of me. I don't know which one to unpack first. And so Dr. Gutstein just said, okay, just go from top to bottom, go from left to right. He gave him some formula. But, if a person is at college, at university, obviously academics are in place and they're doing well. This person is doing well academically, right? But this is how the core deficits can actually manifest, irrespective of whether a person has language, how much he or she talks, whether we classify them as the olden, what we used to call Asperger's syndrome, autism spectrum disorders, highly affected. Core deficits are pervasive. Okay. And then we have the co-occurring conditions, which accompany ASD. So not everyone on the spectrum has these conditions. So when you think of fine motor skills or gross motor skills being impacted, not everyone on the spectrum has these impacted. when you think of developmental delays, when you think of speech and language delays, not everyone on the spectrum is impacted by this. OCD, Down syndrome, seizures, so these are co-occurring conditions that happen along with the core deficits that we've just spoken about, right? Now, when you think about it, it was about 30 years ago that my son was diagnosed, and the recommendations that were given then, and don't get me wrong, it's not that these are not important. These are extremely important as well, right? But we focus solely on this when these are co-occurring, right? So I was told those 3 decades ago, speech language therapy is required, occupational therapy is required, special ed will be required. Okay, that's fine. Those are the recommendations given even today. But now we know more about the brain. So in fact, we should be focusing on the core deficits of autism. That is what will give us the biggest changes, right? So, there is a workbook that's available. This will help you kind of understand what are your child's core deficits, what are co-occurring conditions, what is the impact this has on his life. If you would like to receive a copy of this workbook, please fill in the link. Maybe someone from the Sci Connections team or Raj can share this link with families who would like to kind of avail of this workbook so that they can actually distinguish between the core deficits and the co-occurring conditions happening in your child's life currently. Okay, so this is what it actually is. We reverse it, but it's the core deficits which are pervasive, which need to be looked at, and then you have the co-occurring conditions, right? What we do is we focus on the co-occurring conditions and not on the core areas. It's very important to focus on the core deficits so that we can create changes much faster, right? When I switched from working on co-occurring conditions to the core deficits of autism, I saw huge changes in my son, in the lives of families that I provide services to. And that was a game changer for us. So my teacher, again, Dr. Steve Gutstein from RDI Connect, classifies the core deficits of autism as the inability to self-regulation, the inability to co-regulate, that is understanding my role in a situation, that's co-regulation, joint attention. Nowadays, we look at joint attention as a marker for ASD, competence development, the child or the person feeling competent about their own abilities, and emotional responsibility, which is the impact that I have on others. So these may look like big words, self-regulation, co-regulation, joint attention, competence, emotional responsibility. Let's just go back a bit to the slide that I showed earlier about the core deficits, right? Not understanding their roles in situation is about being able to co-regulate. It's about being able to understand if something just changes, what am I supposed to do now? Then not being able to shift attention in changing situations related to joint attention, related to self-regulation, doesn't have sustained motivation, is related to competence development, avoids activities, runs away. Again, that's related to self-regulation. Not being able to inhibit, again, self-regulation. I can't stop myself from doing some things, right? I find it difficult to accept support, that is personal agency, again, competence development. If a person appears socially disengaged, that comes under co-regulation, the inability to co-regulate. Not understanding how they impact others is related to emotional responsibility. In any interaction, how am I taking on, when I say I am talking about the child on the spectrum, how am I understanding the impact of my actions on others, right? So this is how the core deficits manifest. And these are the 5 categories that all of this falls under. So the 5 core deficit areas of autism are self-regulation, co-regulation, joint attention, competence development, personal agency, and emotional responsibility. So why does this happen? What's going on? We know when we think of autism, we think of it as being neurological in nature, right? So what's happening in the brain of an autistic individual? So here is an image that's used by Dr. Steve Gutstein to explain what is going on, right? So this is an fMRI. It's a cross-section of an fMRI. And you see on the left-hand side is a person on the spectrum, and on the right-hand side is a neurotypical person. And both of them were given exactly the same task. And this fMRI was taken, this fMRI slide was taken at that point of time. And you see lack of neural connectivity in the brain of an autistic individual. Whereas you see much more area of the brain lit up in the brain of a neurotypical person. So this shows that most of the time, right? The stats show that 95% of the time, there isn't anything going on in that's structurally wrong in the brain of a person on the spectrum, right? But there's definitely something going on with the way the brain is wired. There's definitely something going on with the way the connectivity, neural connectivity happens in the brain. On the other hand, neurotypical people, the connections, different brain centers are very well connected. So a situation changes, neural patterns form very quickly, and we're able to change, we're able to adapt without even thinking about it. But this is the problem with people on the spectrum. And this is why, this results in lack of dynamic intelligence, which is the ability to adapt quickly, right? It results in lack of dynamic intelligence. It results in the core areas being impacted. So the 5 core areas are impacted because of the way the brain is wired. Okay. So working on the core deficits can help with co-occurring conditions as well. This has been my experience with my own son, with the several families that we provide services to. So, I'll share an example of a person who started the program as a teenager. Of course, Mohit started when he was 17 years old when we got on the RDI program. By this time, he was totally shut down because there was, I provided lots of behavioral services, and my focus was on building language, working on the verbal operants. And over a period of years, I could see a shutdown happening. When we started the RDI program and we started working on the core areas, I saw a total transformation, and he was already 17. The same thing happened with another of my students. His name is Vishal Srinivas. And, Vishal joined me on the ABA program. His mother, Viji, was a teacher that I had trained. And for 2 years, his language skills developed very quickly, very beautifully. After that, we started experiencing, again, behavioral issues coming up. We were experiencing severe kind of aggression, and they would take public transport to come to Sai at that point of time. And Vishal's mother never knew how it's going to turn out. Anytime something would set him off and he would go into these massive rage attacks, right? So we were struggling. We started reducing demands. We started making it a very, removing all the challenges from his life, right? But even that didn't help. And at that point of time, I remember having a chat with Viji, and I told her about the RDI program and how we can work on the core deficits of autism. And so she joined the program, putting her trust in me. And, within 6 months, we saw a transformation in Vishal, right? So when we work on the core deficits of autism, it results in an improvement in the co-occurring conditions as well, right? So all my students have shown improvement in language. We haven't worked on language directly, but we've seen fantastic improvement in language as well, just by focusing on the core areas, improvements in behaviors, connection with others. All of this has come a long way by addressing the core areas. So at this point of time, I'd like to share a video of a young boy who was 7 years old at that time, and his name is Daksh. And when they started working with me, this is what I saw. So just give me a moment. I'm going to pull up a video so that I can share this with you. So you'll see a video of Daksh playing with his brother. Just sharing it. So we started with a lot of emotional volatility. You'll see the inability to regulate himself. You'll see a lot of little emotional outbursts happening. Okay, so this is Daksh playing with his brother Jayant, and I'll just show you a couple of minutes of this video. Just wanted to make sure if everyone can hear clearly. Raj, is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Went to the petrol pump. Oh God. Oh my. You mean fire extinguisher? Mechanic to repair it. Yeah, okay. Okay, hello mechanic. Later.
So you see this kind of like paying a little bit of attention, but then withdrawing, not being able to stay on task. And now you'll see the emotional volatility also coming up.
Daksha, he wants to add it. It's okay. He wants to have some fun.
Okay, so a little bit of change from his brother's side is bringing about this kind of emotional upheaval in Daksh. So it's like something changes, can't keep up with it. There's this little breakdown after which he calms down again, but it doesn't last for too long. This keeps happening. Let's watch a little more.
He wants to just have some fun. Daksh. What an idea, Sarji. I know. I know. Yeah. Oi, wo.
So you're seeing these, little disruptions happening where everyone else around Daksh adjusts with him. His brother Jayant is the most amazing uh, little boy. I think the siblings are the ones who adjust so much. And you can see these little episodes of Daksh getting angry. With every little change that happens, there's a little outburst. This is the inability to regulate self. This is the inability to understand your role in a situation that is constantly changing in a dynamic world. Was a very natural setting. Okay, so just coming back to my presentation, just give me a second. Okay, so this is where we kind of started with Daksh a year and a half ago. And this is what he was displaying, right? Parents would be like, we don't know how his reaction is going to be when we take him to a different place. There was always this uncertainty around him. Anything can happen at any point of time. I'm sure a lot of parents feel that way. We carry this burden of how is my child going to adjust in a situation that is constantly changing? We spend so much of time on the tabletop. We spend so much of time teaching them language drills, language, but the world out there is constantly changing. What they require on a day-to-day basis is dynamic intelligence, the ability to shift with an environment that's very messy, that's constantly changing, right? So over a period of years and working with so many children on the spectrum, working closely with their families, providing services to support the entire family, I came up with this Autistic Individuals learning sequence, which means we first start with emotional regulation. We start with connecting with the child, bringing some calmness into their lives so that they're ready to engage with us. Remember the way the image we had of the way the brain is wired, that disrupts back and forth connection, the guided participation between parent and child. So that's where we start. We start with emotional regulation. Then it goes on to building engagement. Once the child is more regulated, then they start connecting, they understand limits and boundaries. This is where, the sitting tolerance also develops. Once they're regulated, then we go into extending engagement. Then they become intrinsically motivated to want to engage with us. It's not us taking the responsibility all the time, but it's them wanting to do well. They sustain engagement, they seek challenges. And while this learning sequence looks linear, it's actually layered one on top of the other. The basic, the foundation comes from a child being emotionally regulated. Then we move on to communication getting better. They learn to contribute their thought process. They learn to kind of keep pace with others. And then, of course, use verbal, non-verbal communication tools, right? So these are built layered one on top of the other. And then we move on to them solving problems, the ability to make decisions, think dynamically, keep up with messy situations, right? So these are layered one on top of the other. And when we start working on regulation, everything gets impacted. So I spoke also about Vishal Srinivas earlier. At 18 years old, we started working on emotional regulation. That had a huge impact on his life, and he really started calming down. He went on to get a diploma in cookery. I spoke about Mohit. At 17, we started with regulatory activities. And after that, I realized that Mohit was so talented as an artist. I didn't know about his capability. You can find his work at mohitlakhani.com, right? On Facebook, it's Mohit the Artist. So check this out. We get to understand a child's potential once we work on the emotional regulation piece. Okay. Um, what is the impact? The impact of not working on the core areas. We can continue to work on building language and skills. Not that those are not important, but if we continue to do that and not work on the core areas, then there is going to be a lack of dynamic intelligence. That is the ability to think, to solve problems when things around us are constantly changing. And that's what life is, right? It's messy out there. The lack of independence. If our children are not regulated, if they can't think for themselves, then this results in a lack of independence, right? They're always, I mean, we find it difficult to let go. They find it difficult to let go of us. And it's a very difficult life. You know, so this morning I was talking to an RDI consultant in training, and she was describing her experience with a family she's working with, where she said the mother has no other life except to be with this 13, 14-year-old, because the child is totally dependent on her and doesn't do anything without her. Now, when you think of that, what a burden the mother must be carrying. And a child who's perfectly capable of problem solving, doing things on her own, why isn't she able to? Right? So it leads to lack of independence, and then precious time is lost. The more we continue to not address the core areas, the more difficult it gets for our children, right? So I showed you a video of Daksh a year and a half ago when we first started working on the program. I'm going to now show you a video of his, a recent video where he's at school and he's taking part in a science exhibition. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and take you to Daksh's video. Please just give me a second. Just a second. Okay. So here is Daksh 1.5 years later. And let's take a look at this. Raj, just checking to see if the volume is clear. Okay.
Height is done. Height is done. One. 18.0. 18.0.
Okay, so that was a practice session at home where he's interacting with a child to learn to measure heights and weights. And now they're at school. This is in the middle of an exhibition, extremely messy situation with so many people around. And see how Daksh adjusts with this.
Point one.
So look at the crowds coming in and out. I mean, there can't be a messier situation than this, right? There's noise, there's unknown people going in and out, there's people touching him. Here he's, measuring people, writing down weights, heights.
One 69 height.
So you see how he's able to understand his role in a situation that's constantly evolving, this messiness, people around. But Daksh was emotionally volatile a year and a half ago. Look at how he's adjusting to the messiness of life. This is where we want to see our children doing really well in the messiness of life.
Very good, Ashin. Height.
Okay. So I love this video because it's about um, it's about how he's gotten over those emotional breakdowns that he used to have, not being able to you know take changes in situations, and now being part of a group. And Daksh's mother shared this lovely example with me where she said that his dad came to the exhibition and he just couldn't spot Daksh, and he said, where is he? So it's like being one with the community, being one with his classmates. And this is a huge amount of progress. Now, what did we do? What was the work that we did? We worked on the core areas of autism. We worked on the core deficits of autism. And these are things that have happened. These are the big changes that have happened in his life, right? Um, just going back to my PowerPoint. So that was a hugely impressive video of the improvement that we saw in Daksh's life. Now, this is what life is about, right? We're on this line, this trajectory of life, and things can get, can get a little better for our children, and then they can really improve, or things could get worse, or it could be disastrous. Anything can happen, right? Um, so it's better to start young when you don't have too much of undoing to do. So in Daksh's case, he started at 7. I've had children who started at 3, 4, 5, and we've seen good movement. Of course, there's always hope for the others. Like I told you, I started with Mohit at 17. Vishal started at 18. There was another of my students who started at 32. He actually came to Sign Connections, and we did a lot of intensive work with him, and we saw improvement even there. But in those cases, then we have a lot of undoing to do also. Many of our older individuals carry anxiety and aggression, and so a lot of undoing, and then they start progressing. But there's hope for everyone, and there's place for everyone to do well. Once we start working on the core deficits, everyone knows about neuroplasticity. The brain can continue to evolve at whatever age. So I'm here to tell you that there's hope for your child. And I just wanted to share feedback from Aradhana Kaur, who's a speech language pathologist who's worked with Daksh in the past. And when she saw, the work, this is what she commented. She said that I often think that when the child is diagnosed, the entire family gets impacted. But most of the intervention programs set goals only for the child without the involvement of the family. It's about the relationship. It's about the back and forth interaction between parent and child, which is the root, which is the core, and then this impacts everything else, right? And then she went on to say about Daksh. She said, what struck me the most was when Daksh's mom told me that he is able to participate in a shared story build-up activity where mom writes down one sentence and Daksh is able to himself take the next turn to build the story. This activity also so well demonstrated his ability for collaborative work. I would have never imagined that a child at this level of expressive speech would be able to add his own ideas to the story while maintaining focus to take turns with his mom. We would never think of doing a language activity that involves so much of independent thinking. We often zoom into too much on building the child's language and don't provide opportunities for building thinking. It made me wonder, what good is it to build language without building on dynamic thinking, cognitive flexibility needed for collaborative work. And here I believe Aradhana is talking about the core deficits of autism, which need to be handled so that the other co-occurring things can take off. I also know that he has been able to reach so far in less than a year of being on the program, and he's a far more calmer child now. So this is lovely to hear from your colleagues, speech language pathologists who kind of testify to the fact that yes, working on the core deficits of ASD can lead to life transforming changes in our children. Even if your child is much older, it's never too late. We can always build a better future. So I just want to summarize what we spoke about in this presentation. Core deficits are different from co-occurring conditions. We tend to focus on co-occurring. What we should do is focus on the core. There are five core deficits of autism: self-regulation, co-regulation, joint attention, competence development or personal agency, and emotional responsibility. All autistic individuals have the core deficits, but not all autistic individuals have co-occurring conditions. Core deficits are the result of lack of neural connectivity. The result of not working on core deficits is lack of dynamic intelligence. Precious time is lost and lack of independence, right? So the sooner we get to it, the better it is. And just to remind you that if you want your workbook so that you can figure out for your child about what are the core deficits, what are the co-occurring conditions that your child is experiencing, please do, click on the link that has been shared by the PsyConnections team, and we'll be happy to send the workbook to you. Also, I will now be moving over to questions. So if there are questions, please share them with me so that I can answer those questions. Raj, over to you. If anyone has questions, please do share, and I'll take a few minutes to respond to questions. Okay, so please feel free to keep the questions coming. If you need any information about RDI, about group coaching for your family, please do feel free to get in touch with us. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation about the core deficits of autism. Thank you.